What do all of these women have in common? It's not that they're the front of a Save the Children catalog. It's that they've led billion-dollar companies, facilitated movements, and brought down authoritarian regimes. Now, I've worked with women like these from across the globe. And in my work, I realized that these women did so with seemingly no leverage. They weren't born into power, into royalty or riches. They often faced political structures that demeaned or excluded them, or religious orders that cast them as inferior. Yet despite all of this, they were not only able to succeed, but to catalyze significant change in their societies. How did they do it? So to understand their success, we must first explore our perception of power. Now, the historical model of power was invented by and for men, and it's characterized by having power over something or someone. In this system, power is often perceived as being vested in single individuals, and it operates through a command and control structure. Frequently, the way one gains or holds on to this type of power is through fear, lack of transparency, and intimidation. And at the level of the state, violence is often used as a means to defend this type of power, and threats to usurp it can even prompt one to murder their own people. Such is the case today with Bashar al-Assad in Syria, or Stalin in the former Soviet Union. Now today, countries, governments, and companies have become so embedded in this model that they've become these sites of full-fledged masculinity contests, with the players engaged in this cutthroat struggle to prove their manhood, often at the expense of everybody else. Our institutions have also been affected by it too. So take a look at America's military spending. We spend more than the next 7 nations combined on our war machine, compared to at this tiny sliver that we spend on softer areas such as education and healthcare and diplomacy. This is evidence that even our policy and budgeting decisions have been co-opted by this power over mentality too. But the women that I've worked with and the organizations that they run have utilized power in entirely different ways. This inspired me to see, were there commonalities in the way that women lead? So I had an idea. So I wanted to do this gathering where women social change leaders from across the world would get together and exchange ideas and talk about leadership and systems change. And it happened. And 8 months later, in a former convent overlooking Lake Como, the ways that women spoke about leadership and power were markedly different. There were no echoes of gripping power, of being afraid to share secrets, of limiting agency or restricting people's feedback. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Our impressions, published in a private report that I authored, led to further follow-up investigations by Ashoka that cross-analyzed the leadership styles of women social change leaders from 15 countries. I realized that the way that these women gained power was counterintuitive. It wasn't by hoarding it, no, but by giving it away. The research found that these women operationalized inclusivity. They excelled at building bridges and alliances, and they practiced something called collective leadership, which is a shared process of co-design and collaboration that relies on the expertise of diverse actors to come up with a solution, particularly those who would be affected by it. They deviated from the heavily male presidency or CEO model, instead sharing power with others. They resisted expanding their ventures into other countries when a host country would be better equipped to run it themselves. Instead, they empowered local leaders to run it. And they stressed listening and working deeply and in tandem with those beneath them, beside them, and across from them, recognizing that they alone did not have the answers. Research is buttressed by findings in other sectors. Alice Eagley's meta-analysis, for example, showed that whereas men are more likely to be transactional leaders, women are more likely to be transformational ones. Transactional leaders use systems of punishments and rewards, whereas transformational leaders focus on lifting people up rather than putting them down. They are empathetic and supportive, and they treat people as individuals rather than as cogs in some kind of machine. Now, I want to be clear, though, that in case you thought that women are somehow inherently like this, that's not the case. This behavior is learned. It's learned in a society that encourages women to be emotionally expressive and caring, and one that rewards men who act strong, self-sufficient, and stoic. And the world is begging for this type of participatory leadership. So I'd like you all to raise your hand if you've participated in a protest, a sit-in, or some kind of activism in the past year. That's what I thought. From Chile to Hong Kong to the USA, people are sick of being ignored, and they're demanding that leadership include them in decision-making processes. Now, people have this fundamental need to feel heard, and if they don't, they will rise up. And the advent of social media has given people a means to practice using their voices in a low-risk environment before they hit the pavement, which has given them more courage to do so. In particular, millennials and Gen Z, like you and me, we really want our voices to be heard. And if we don't feel like our voices are being heard, we will quit a company or vote out a politician without a second thought. I'd like to propose that the leadership our world needs today won't come from traditional power brokers. Instead, it will come from the typically invisible and oppressed, namely women. It turns out that the powerless hold much more power than they might think, and they wield it differently too. Lisa Venneklassen and Valerie Miller came up with this new power model that I feel like we should all lean into. So instead of emphasizing taking power over something or someone, they emphasize giving power to others, sharing power with others, and recognizing the power within others. Today, I'm going to talk about the first two. Power 2 focuses on amplifying each person's individual agency. Now, I'm sure you know who Greta Thunberg is, right? Millennials. Our millennial hero. She was just heralded as Time's Person of the Year, the first millennial, actually, to be given that honor. Now, Greta has actually resisted calling herself the leader of the climate movement. She actually said, "I am not the leader of the climate movement. I am just one of many faces." She resists every opportunity to glorify herself or to make herself the star, continuously bringing others into the struggle instead. For example, at a press conference, when media started to ask her questions, she said, "Let them answer," pointing to the other activists. Now, how many leaders today would actually do this? Think about the politicians. Would they take a press question and be like, "Oh, let the other person on stage answer that"? No, that never happens. Now, Greta's use of the Power 2 model catalyzed 4 million people to mount the biggest climate demonstrations in history. Her leadership shows us that whether you want people to support a cause, a company, or a campaign, it can be better to lead from below. Power with is all about bonding together in order to create collective strength and finding shared goals. It's intersectional and nimble in nature, and it focuses on leveraging each person's talents, skills, and resources in order to come up with the greatest impact. Research by Maria Stefan and Erica Chenoweth of the United States Institute for Peace demonstrates the effectiveness of Power with. I love this research. And Maria's a Fletcher alum, by the way. After reviewing 323 movements, they realized that nonviolent movements were actually much more effective than violent ones, which is totally counterintuitive, right? Why? Because nonviolent movements were substantially more inclusive. They enabled greater participation, and greater participation lends itself to more diverse actors, and diverse actors lends itself to more diverse tactics. They also showed that when women leaders were part of movements, they were substantially more likely to be successful. For example, the Armenian protests of 2018 were spearheaded by women activists who catalyzed all different factions of society to come together against one common cause: to oust political strongman Sarge Sargsyan. Now, instead of taking up arms or throwing rocks at the police, they got creative. They told every household to bang their pots and pans outside of their houses every night at 11 p.m. Now, think about this approach, right? They said, okay, you don't have to leave your houses, so that enabled anyone to participate. If you were elderly or disabled or taking care of a bunch of running, screaming children, you could still go outside and bang your pots and pans at 11 p.m. It enabled everyone to join in the fight. And protesters in this fight were so focused on bridging their differences. It was incredible. This photo, I love this photo, shows how their compassion wasn't even limited to themselves. They actually embraced police officers and riot officers in an effort to get them to join in the struggle too. By sticking to these nonviolent tactics and ditching an us against you mentality, they were in fact able to draw defectors from the security regime, which is a critical factor shown to accelerate the downfall of regimes. And this is exactly what happened. Now, think about this. In 11 days, it was only 11 days of peaceful protest, they were able to oust this political strongman. And now the country is experiencing the closest thing to democracy it's seen since the fall of the Soviet Union. You see, the state knows how to fight men with guns and rocks. This is how it's always been done. But they have a gaping blind spot when it comes to softer, one could say more feminine tactics, such as dance, poetry, art, song, and crucially, love. They are dumbfounded when a woman hugs them, when thousands of women dance a choreographed routine blindfolded in the streets before them, when little old ladies walk around a plaza for hours and days and months holding photos of their disappeared children. So I just returned from Chile, which is ablaze with protests. Has anyone been to Chile recently? It's wild. It's like the subways are like filled with rubble. All of the sidewalks have been taken up by picks to throw things at the police. It's undergoing massive, massive protests. I got to meet a Chilean feminist, and basically instead of Chilean feminists waiting to be let in, they've decided to create their own feminist political party, which is incredible. We don't have that in America, right? Speaking to one of the founders in Santiago, she stressed how this feminist political party is managed so well, she said. She said it's intersectional, it's collaborative, and we make a serious effort to hear what everyone has to say. Now, she also emphasized the importance of male allyship. She talked about how with their documents that they've been getting together, they actually had a bunch of men that work for the court system review them to make sure that when they presented the papers for the political party, it would actually go through, and it did. So I think that point is also really important, the effectiveness of male allies. So today, movements like these across the globe are only growing, right? But we're also facing a dangerous backlash, one where strongmen are clambering their way to the top via platforms of fear and racism and xenophobia, and then they're abusing their power once they get there. Yet we have too much at stake to let these strongmen manipulate us. We have come too far to be dragged back to a handmaid's tale. So the first thing that we have to do if we want to ditch this power over model, we have to redefine masculinity. We have to make masculinity less about domination and more about empathy. How can we do this? Well, we can raise men to become willing caregivers, empathetic leaders, and compassionate people. We can encourage men and boys to cry and to embrace them for it rather than punish them. We can show them that reaching out to ask for help isn't a sign of weakness, but a sign of strength, because it means that they have the courage to be vulnerable. It takes way more courage to be vulnerable and to cry in front of other people than it does to punch someone or throw a rock at them. We have to stop telling women to act more like men and start encouraging men to act a little bit more like women. We also have to step out of our organizational silos. So think with me for 1 second. Can you imagine what would happen if March for Our Lives, the Women's March, and Black Lives Matter all came together under one umbrella, what they would accomplish? They would be unstoppable. We have to realize that if we really want to create change, we're all fighting the same fight. And on an institutional level, we have to see that using diverse bodies of input will only make our agencies stronger and more powerful and more innovative and higher performing. We have to start to see power not as finite, but as infinite. The more that we share it, the more that we will all have. And today, on International Women's Day, as hundreds and thousands of women march and dance and sing and recite poetry across the globe, look at them. Listen to them. Let them. No. Ask them to lead. We're entering a new power world, and that necessitates a new type of leadership. So, all I'm asking of you here today is to be the type of leader that the world needs, rather than the leader the world already has. Thank you.